Hi, guys. Alexa Curtis here, and you are listening to a new episode of The New Unfiltered. If you aren't following the podcast or myself on social media, make sure to do so at Alexa_Curtis, as well as at The New Unfiltered. And make sure to also check out the new community that is being built for Be Fearless and the Be Fearless Summit. I know I said after the last summit, I probably wasn't going to do another one, but the response from the Yukon one was just too good. So I'm certainly still interested in bringing this to other colleges and looking forward to continuing the conversation there. But through a lot of my work and research, I've come across so many different people, and I really notice when someone says something to me that stands out, and it's something that I think about daily. And some time ago, I was on a Zoom call with Dave Kerpen. And if you're not familiar with him, he is an author, an entrepreneur, and a phenomenal speaker. And he first received media attention in the Boston sports market in the late 1990s and early 2000s for his sales strategies at professional sporting events. And since then, he has capitalized into so much more and is a very successful serial entrepreneur. And during this call, he mentioned to me about building a personal brand as well as trying to start a company similar to what I was doing. And because of that, it really made me think, what are the tools to building some type of company or personal brand? And so that's why I wanted to have him on the podcast today. So Dave, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. Good to connect again.
Well, I know I just introduced you through the short bio that I have, but would love for you to jump in and give a little bit more expertise from your experience in business and to what you do now and why you got started.
Sure. So I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and I love building companies and solving problems that way. And I started while I was in school. I was as you mentioned, I was a ballpark vendor in Boston while I was at BU, and being a ballpark vendor is actually a lot like being a mini entrepreneur, because you're only paid based on how much you sell. And so I was able to sell a lot of Crunch and Munch, which was the product that I sold, and make quite a bit of money and build a personal brand as the Crunch and Munch guy back then throughout the process. So I think that while I was in school helped me fall in love with brand building, B, marketing, PR, and C, entrepreneurship. And so yeah, I've gone on to start and build several companies, and we sold one last year, which was great, pretty life-changing, I guess, and with my wife. And yeah, and now I'm building a company called Apprentice, and working with hundreds and soon thousands of college students myself. So excited to chat, and if I can be helpful for any of your listeners in terms of how they think about building their brand and or building their businesses, I'm delighted to help.
It's so funny because when I moved to Austin from LA, originally being from the East Coast, I had never heard this word building thrown around so often. And now in this city and this tech startup hub, that is such a common name. So can you explain to me, when you say you're building something, or when you talk to people that you're thinking of investing in their company, what does that mean? Like, what does it cost or take for someone to start building something?
Yeah, that's an interesting word. I like when I'm asked questions that I've never been asked before because and when doing a lot of interviews, it gets a little tiresome. So I'm excited to answer a new question. I think that at its core, the difference, building is a great word, because if you're working for another company, you're not building anything for yourself. You're not building equity for yourself. You're building something for somebody else. You're helping somebody else build something. And so I guess part of the reason I'm so biased towards entrepreneurship for people, and including young people, is this idea of investing in yourself and building something. It's like building a house that you can live in versus renting somebody else's house. What would you rather do? Well, building your own house might be hard work, but at the end of the day, you've got a house. and renting somebody else's house might be easy, but at the end of the day, you got nothing. And so this is what the entrepreneur's journey is building something from scratch and brick by brick. And it's hard work, but it's pretty darn rewarding if you can be successful at it.
I equally agree with my bias towards entrepreneurship. And I am only 24, but I think just having seen so many young people become so obsessed, but not know what the building blocks are. Can you go into some of that, and through your career, and to someone who perhaps wants to start some type of company right now, what is the first step? And then how do you, not to use the word again, but to use it again, build on top of those initial steps and keep growing?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me say this: it's the best time ever to be an entrepreneur, and it's the easiest time ever to be an entrepreneur. Now that doesn't mean it's easy. There's lots of challenges, but because of the internet, because of no code, because of social media, TikTok in particular, now it's a really exciting time to pursue entrepreneurship. So I think the first and most important thing is, and I think I mentioned this earlier in terms of my own perspective, is solving a problem. It doesn't make sense to be an entrepreneur for the sake of it. It doesn't make sense to just say, I want to be in business. You have to actually be solving a problem. You actually have to be thinking through what there is, where there's an issue, where there's a challenge, where there's a need, and then solve that issue, challenge, or need. So the good news is there are problems everywhere and at every scale, right? There are little problems. My daughter's first business she started when she was 8 she was at a farmer's market in our town, and she got like a muffin or something, and then she wanted something to drink, and there was no beverages for sale. And she said, Dad, there's no beverages for sale. That's a problem. And I said, yeah, you're right. How can we solve that? She started a lemonade stand at that farmer's market and made several $1,000s at age 8. So that's a small scale problem. And then there's, really big problems like people not being able to find stuff on the internet, and that's Google solved that, right, and became one of the most important, most valuable companies in history. So that's the first step, is identifying a problem and validating that problem by talking to people, surveying people, doing some research, making sure that it really is a problem that needs solving. And then I would say the next most important step is putting together a team. Folks you can't do it alone. And so it's finding people that you trust that can be equally or near equally as passionate as you are about solving that problem. In an ideal world, it's people that you trust that actually have a different skill set from you. There's a model I like, the 3H model of building a business, requiring a hustler, a hacker, and a hipster, which are very broad, somewhat silly terms, but ultimately, the hacker is your engineer, your coder, your science and engineering nerd. The hustler is your sales and marketing person, and the hipster is your design creative type person. Having ideally all three of those capacities in 3 different people, in 3 different founders, ideally, is a great situation. If you don't have that, it's hard to do stuff on your own. And then I would say the next step is starting to figure out what resources you'll need to solve the problem and to build your solution. And again, there are very tech heavy, big scale problems and companies that require a lot of capital. And then there are professional services companies that require zero capital, and you can be a consultant or like a TikTok consultant. Almost anyone listening to this literally could be a TikTok consultant for Fortune 100 company execs that don't understand TikTok, right? So don't sleep on the fact that there are a lot of problems out there, and you, the listener, have a lot of knowledge, skills and aptitude to help solve those problems that you might not even realize, right? You might take for granted that everyone knows how to use TikTok because all your friends know how to use TikTok. But I can guarantee you fewer than 10% of Fortune 100 company senior execs know how to use TikTok. Well, that's an opportunity right there for just about everyone that's listening to this.
Okay, that's genius. And I have a lot of other questions and things that came to mind, but I want to jump on the back of that really quick. So say you're listening to this and that is something that you're interested in, social media or social media marketing, and that's a great idea. What's your first step? Because that, and especially TikTok, is kind of a newer platform. What would be your first step or piece of advice to a 20-something who's like, I want to go and work at TikTok or a marketing company and follow in that path with exactly that job title that you just said?
If you want to work for somebody, call them up and demonstrate that you have the passion to do it. There's a great book I read when I was 22 and a little confused about what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, called What Color Is Your Parachute? And it's probably the book that I've given the most people and recommended to the most people over the years, probably, I don't know, 400 people or so, and ranging from age 12 to 62, because we all have times in our lives where we're not so sure what we want to do with our lives. And What Color Is Your Parachute is amazing for two reasons. One is it turns the idea of job search on its first of all, it helps you do the hard work of figuring out what it is that you're really passionate about, and whether you want to work for yourself or a small business or a big business or a nonprofit or a government agency, and really helps you hone in on what you want. So when I read it, I had an elementary education degree, but I had this experience having worked in Boston sports market and loving marketing and sales and promotions. And I read the book and I put it all together, and I said, you know what, I'd love to work in marketing for Disney. And there was a Disney office in Boston. And that brings me to the second part of what's so great about What Color Is Your Parachute. It says instead of applying for job listings where the jobs have already probably been filled, just call up just literally call up the place where you want to work and get a hold of somebody and get yourself in the door and do an informational interview and start sharing your passion. And organizations will hire folks that demonstrate that sort of passion. So I went into Radio Disney in Boston and I had a meeting with the station manager, and I said, I'm a recent grad, but I know how to market, and I love kids, and I'm actually listening to Radio Disney and loving the pop music. I'm probably the only straight male adult on the planet that loves Radio Disney, but I do. And she hired me, and within a few months I was the top salesperson in the country and making really great money for age, I guess I was 22 back then. So the idea is just to go for it, and you'd be surprised that actually that method actually works quite a bit.
And perhaps what if you wanted to start your own company? Like you are super into social media and you would like to help strategize for many of these bigger companies as a young person. What would be your advice for that person?
Yeah, the first thing I would do is it's very similar. I would call up that first client. I would sell that first client. Like, people spend a lot of time building websites and thinking through all this stuff they have to do, but I would validate the concept by calling up 10 folks and selling them and getting a deal done. And then once I got my first deal done, I would then I would build my website, etc. And you could call them up and say, look, you can be honest. Look, I'm starting out on this. So, normally I'm going to charge $20,000, but for you, I'm going to charge $2,000, 90% off, because I want to prove it myself. And it's still $2,000 bucks. And then I would use that first deal to build my website, or and start to build my online presence, and maybe hire a couple freelancers, etc.
If Radio Disney was still around, I would have pitched them a show called Get the Deal Done with Dave, because it's so simple, right? And I But you're often asked by young people, I'm too scared to do it. I'm too scared to write that email. And if you're too scared, it's hard for someone to push you to do it until you're comfortable enough to do it. But I was reading one of your articles in Inc. and you were talking about someone being a good salesperson, good but not great. And as an entrepreneur, it's all sales. Like that's something that I've learned, whether I'm selling the summit or I'm selling my own personal brand, getting good at selling as well as being comfortable with rejection is critical. So how do you decipher what good and great means as a salesperson and when you're hiring?
Yeah. So first, let me go back to what you said about fear, because I do agree that fear is the number one thing that holds people back pretty much in all areas, including sales. And my strategy with respect to fear is to embrace the fear and act anyway, which is like literally the definition of courage. And so when we embrace our fear and go for it anyway, and have the courage to risk rejection and failure and all that stuff, that's when we can be successful. Sales is really key, and there's a lot of folks that build products and are really, really smart, but can't sell and ultimately can't be successful. So I would urge everybody listening to work on their sales skills, because sales is everywhere in life. Even if sales is asking that girl out that you have a crush on, or convincing your parents to pay for graduate school, or whatever it is, sales is everywhere. Being able to convince others of things. And the great news is you can get better. There's lots of great courses one can take on sales, videos that you can watch, books that you can read, and you can get a lot better at sales. A lot of it is listening skills, really listening well, being attuned to folks sharing their issues, their concerns, their needs, and then helping solve those concerns, issues, or needs. When we can do that, we can become very good salespeople.
Yeah, and so much of it, like you said, is people skills, and that's a really great way if you are younger to capitalize on something like an internship or having some type of side hustle, which is so common now because that's how you learn. When you were starting and before you became so successful, did you have a side hustle? Was there something that you were working on that wasn't really paying your bills initially?
No, I was good at making money from the start. I mean, while I was at school, I worked as the ballpark vendor, and I was making really, frankly, great money then. I would still call it a side hustle. I guess my suggestion is that side hustles you don't have to not make money with a side hustle. On the contrary, wouldn't it be great if we could take our side hustles and make good money from the start, and think through how we can make more money. One lesson I learned over time, which is why I gave the example earlier for discounting something from $20,000 to $2,000, is that young people tend to devalue themselves a lot, and entrepreneurs starting off tend to devalue themselves a lot. When we started our first company, Likeable, our first clients, we were charging as little as $500 a month for. And I was schlepping and doing all kinds of work for $500. And then as we grew, we realized we couldn't sustain ourselves charging $500 a month. So we doubled our prices and tripled our prices and quadrupled our prices and kept raising our prices. And every time we raised our prices, we were a bit nervous that folks wouldn't want to do business with us. And it just never happened, like never. We went from $500 a month to $50,000 a month, and we're able to grow our client base at the same time, not lose clients. And so I think the lesson here is side hustles are great, but know your worth and don't settle for less.
Yeah, that initial part and time to figure out your worth is so interesting, and that's something that I always am intrigued to see on Shark Tank, is when they're evaluating a company and they're always projecting what this company is worth, when at the beginning they still might be bringing in, for example, $100,000 or $200,000 a year, and then the evaluation is, I think it's either like 3 or 8 times that. So if someone is listening to this episode and has been working on this side hustle for let's say 6 months, and they're making $500 a month from it, and it's still not full time. And they just are so desperate to leave their job that they hate and go full time with this. What do we do? What's the advice?
Well, it's hard without more context. If you're only making $500 a month at something, sometimes that might not be the right fit either, right? So, I could say go all in and quit your job, but the truth is, I don't know their situation. I don't know their situation. I would say, it's really important to do that self-inventory and to understand what your needs are, and also think through where you are in life, right? So when we started our first company, we already had a child. I didn't leave my job. I was a teacher at the time. I didn't leave my job until we secured enough clients to be able to pay for healthcare for our daughter. And I would say that so much depends on context, right? If you are a single person in your 20s that doesn't have a mortgage or a partner or kids, it's the best time to take significant risks and quit your job and go for it. That being said, if you have a baby, then no, you probably shouldn't quit your job, and maybe you should never quit your job. So ultimately, it's really in the eyes of the individual, and sort of knowing what their risk profile is and what your needs are.
It's really nice to talk to successful entrepreneurs because they're always so adamant about taking that risk. And is there one risk in your career path that has stood out to you that was the biggest risk? And I know that you said you had a child at this point and whatnot, but is there anything looking back that you felt the most fearless doing? It was the biggest risk that you took and it paid off?
Biggest risk I took was when we started our first company, and starting a company with my wife, I think was a big risk, because if it went to hell, it could have really risked the marriage and the relationship, which ultimately is more important to me than business success. So that was the biggest risk. And I think when I counsel couples on starting businesses together, I do say that they need to be very cautious and very transparent and very communicative and very careful because of that risk. It does blow up. Entrepreneurship blows up quite a few relationships and marriages. So yeah, looking back, that was probably the biggest risk, but I am proud to say that it did in fact work out very well.
I'm always fascinated by couples who start companies together, because I just think that shows so much strength as a couple, because it's really freaking hard, I am assuming, to do that and to make it happen every day. But I would assume that element of balance becomes so important in every step of that way. So you're building something now called Apprentice, and it's very kind of in line with what what I've done with colleges and whatnot. So tell me a little bit about that before we wrap up.
Sure. So throughout my first several years in business and a couple different businesses, I was able to hire college students who worked for me while they were in school part-time, and then often came to work for me full-time after they graduated. And I had one such student apprentice named Rob, and he came to me a few years ago and said, when he was a senior in college, and said, Dave, I've learned so much from you, and I know you've done this with other college students, and I know I've done valuable work for you. I think there's a business model here. And I said, wow, you're totally right. And Rob went from being my apprentice while in school to being my business partner and co-CEO on the company called Apprentice, which is a managed marketplace that connects CEOs and entrepreneurs with the best and brightest college students. And 2 years later, I'm very proud that we hit the $1 million mark in revenues. And so I helped to make Rob a $1 million entrepreneur at the age of 24. And now we are continuing to scale up. So if you're listening and you are a college student, or if you're listening and you are an entrepreneur, a small business owner, we can probably be helpful either way. And I invite you to go to chooseapprentice.com and learn more. And mention Alexa and we'll give you a special discount. How's that?
Dave, you are so amazing. I'm going to ask you one last question here. Anyone who doesn't have a mentor and wants a mentor right now, where do they go and find a mentor?
Yeah, a mentorship is a huge part of my life. We're actually building a nonprofit this year to support mentorship of young entrepreneurs and student entrepreneurs. And I would say use your network, use your LinkedIn, your parents, connections with your parents, and reach out to 20 people, and you'll start to build conversations with people. There's a lot of people out there that love to give back and love to provide mentorship. And again, talk about sort of being fearless and being courageous. I would say there's no downside to reaching out. And frankly, if anyone wants me to mentor them, I do mentorship every Thursday afternoon for free, and you can schedule that at scheduledave.com. And I'm delighted to mentor anyone that's listening myself.
Dave, thank you so much for coming on today. It was such an awesome chance to chat and connect with you. And I look forward to continuing the conversation about mentorship in business following this episode. And anyone else who is interested in business as well as startup, Dave has some really phenomenal articles online. And that is initially how I found him, was through one of his ink pieces. So certainly check that out. And for anyone else who is interested in kind of next step for the summit and for the mentorship platform here, I am really excited to have this launch as of Monday of last week. And what the goal of this is basically beta testing for this app. Now, through the process of looking into investors and funding, I'm just realizing a lot about that journey and that process, and obviously being very crystal clear on the community that I've built through these summits. And so to do that, I really wanted to capitalize on taking everyone who's come to these summits, and a lot of you who have followed me, who are new or who have followed me from the beginning, and putting you all into one platform. So the link to that is in my Instagram bio, as well as my website. And you can certainly go right on there and submit to be a part. And I'm kind of calling it the Soho House of Mentorship. And if you're not familiar with Soho House, it's basically this platform and this community place where you can go and submit to go to these events and be a part of the house. And I think that's a really cool thing that I found that I really enjoy, is having a community that is, in a sense, already ingrained with you, because I find a lot of people, they're always looking for mentors or this community and they don't know where to go. But a lot of times where you go is exactly where you have already been going, through your friends, through the people that you know. So you want to make sure that you really utilize those resources. And I will see you guys back next week for a new episode of The New Unfiltered. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.